Have you ever wanted something to happen so badly that when it looks like it's finally happening, you can't believe it? You can't believe it's true? Well, that's kind of how I feel right now because over the last week, we have seen some things happen in Hamilton, in our local politics, around our council table that I never thought would happen. We not only saw council hold one of their own to account by supporting the recommendations in the Integrity Commissioner's report, but then we also saw a surprising vote on the Ward 5 seat, a seat that arguably should have gone to a by-election. But I think a lot of people thought that the outcome was already kind of preordained. And it didn't go the way certainly some of the old guard wanted it to go. That was another surprise. And then we saw that the efforts of citizens, 18,000 plus, around stopping the sprawl and keeping the same urban boundary, we saw that vote go the way of progress, go the way of what so many of us for so long have wanted this city to be all about, which is actually caring about the environment, actually caring about accountability and transparency, actually listening to citizens. So I have to wonder, is it too good to be true, or is it possible that the old guard, who may still be running for re-election, are now running scared? I'm so thrilled to have on the program people who really know how City Hall operates and what power looks like around that council table. And of course, I'm referring to Joey Coleman. Joey, you are a Southern Fellow, correct? You are
Yes.
also an independent journalist, and those credentials are important. But even more so, I think, is the fact that you have been really on the front lines with this old guard of council for so long. You have actually Shovegate, we all recall, when you were grabbed by one of the counselors and everything you went through on that. So, Joey, let me just ask you right off the top before I get to our next panelist. Do you think that something has changed?
2 decades of decline at City Hall, where the primary qualification for power was loyalty to the old guard, which has resulted in a lack of competence, which we've seen time and time again. Added to that, the old guard changed their pension plan 5 years ago to increase their pensions by about 40%. And now they've maxed out their pensions. So you have a whole storm of things combined with Hamiltonians are fed up. And the urban boundary expansion vote, which shows the power of a grassroots mobilization, the likes of which Ontario has not seen since Guelph's Walmart battles of the mid 2000s.
I want to bring in now Margaret Shkimba. Margaret, you wrote an excellent column or blog. You're, of course, a columnist for the Hamilton Spectator as well, but you wrote an excellent blog this week about your response to Sam Marula's victory lap / puff piece in the Hamilton Spectator. What got you so angry about it? Because I was just kind of like, oh, ridiculous. But you were quite frustrated. Can you tell us why? And welcome to the show.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks for having me here. Okay, so for a couple of reasons. One of them is personal, and one of them, it has to do with just the crassness of publicly boasting how wealthy you are in a time when we've got people being kicked out of encampments because they have no place to live. And Sam Marula has, over the time of his tenure in council, been responsible for the housing portfolio. So for him to boast like that is really quite crass and classless. The second reason is a little personal, because I'm from that part of town. That's where I grew up, and I used to shop at the Center Mall. And what happened at the Center Mall is a true travesty in development, and that Sam Marula could have had anything to do with it in terms of bringing it on, helping with the design, in any way consider that some kind of success in his career or a legacy that he left behind is really a shame. And no one's ever sort of called him out on that. So there's a couple of things there. One of them is every time I go to the Center Mall, I think this place is terrible. Much like when I go to Meadowlands, this place is terrible for lots of reasons, mostly for pedestrian and climate reasons around the big box store and driving culture. But also this just total boastfulness. Now, not everybody is a bad person. Samuela has done some good things for his ward. People have voted him in consistently over the years. He's clearly liked. He gets things done for the people. It's how he's acted with the rest of council, and how we all have to remember that, to be a little trite, no man is an island. He didn't get there by himself. I don't know how many of the ideas were original to him. I don't know if the things that he did could have been improved upon. The scuttlebutt in the community is that doesn't share a lot of credit. He takes a lot of credit. So, let's put this in perspective. This one piece in perspective. It can't go unchallenged is, I suppose, the main thing is that such a statement by him that I'm an incredible counselor, that nobody's done any better than me. Statements like that, they can't go unchallenged.
He's taking a victory lap. None of them deserve a victory lap after what they did. There has never been a bigger scandal, Joey, in the history of Hamilton than Sewergate. The fact that the Hamilton Spectator, in all of its long years, has never had more letters on a single issue. The fact that even people who like this or like that or like this counselor or like that person, they're still mad at all of them for Sewergate. So I just think that it's pretty tacky to have broken the public trust with those votes in a massive scandal, and then to come out and say, as you're retiring, how exceptional you are at the job that you've done. Joey?
Oh, well, that's it. I mean, they've been committing these acts of, it is corrupt. Let's face it. It's corrupt, not in the sense that they're putting money in their pocket, but corrupt in that they're violating the public trust, and that they covered this up during an election to ensure that they would get reelected. And actually, one can argue that based upon the fact that they increased their pensions so significantly, that indirectly they have benefited financially from these cover-ups. And, Sam goes on about his pension. That was a big maneuver by them and financial staff to their own benefit that served absolutely no benefit to the taxpayers of Hamilton. How many times have we watched Sam Marula and Chad Collins act like two high school students during a meeting, disrespecting delegates?
There's an arrogance there. Many, many delegations have complained about the arrogance when you're in front of them, the way they would look at their phones or whisper or whatever. They insult citizens. They call us names. I mean,
that's when they actually show up to sit in the council chamber. Like, right. It gets even worse than that. They can't even get enough of them to show up to maintain quorum. It's ridiculous. No other municipality in Ontario has quorum issues. Like, I talk to people and they're like, how hard is it to go down to your kitchen table, open your laptop, and do what Sam Marula does, which is stare into the camera while he does whatever it is he's doing on his phone all day?
So we have an old guard that has displayed arrogance, that doesn't care enough sometimes to show up and do the job that they're getting paid and pensioned very well for, that actually calls their own citizens names. One of these days I'm going to ask the Twitterverse, and maybe people who are watching this OShow can let me know, especially if you're out of Hamilton, is that a thing? Do other councillors call in other cities their constituency keyboard morons, et cetera, cabals, whatever else they come up with? Is that a normal thing, or is that just another legacy of this old guard? So even if you have progressive ideals, even if you are someone who doesn't like the way that they vote on things and you're not aligned with their policies per se, I don't think anybody likes the way that many of the old guard has treated citizens and treated the job, and the lack of professionalism. So let me go to you, Margaret. With the Stop the Sprawl vote, and with the claims that they're going to hold themselves more accountable to better behavior, less bullying of staff, the rest of it, do you think that we are going to see a change in council after the next election, even if a lot of these people get back into their jobs because citizens are fed up, to Joey's point from earlier? Or do you think that it's so baked in the cake, those behaviors, that we are going to have different people in those chairs? And as Sam says, he's leaving, we'll see. But I hope he does, obviously. But do you think that they're capable of treating us the way that they should, Margaret? Or do we really need new people in those chairs to have a real reboot of this city's politics and get us out of this dark era?
Well, my first reaction is, well, I guess it depends on how much they want their jobs as to whether or not they'll change, right? So if they really want their jobs and they know that the wind is changing, that these leadership styles that have been evidenced by counselors of the old guard, like Sam Urella and Terry Whitehead, where they think that they can just berate people, that they're going to get action that way. If they, I think some of that behavior is not going to change, of course, because it's baked into them. I don't know that Lloyd Ferguson, per se, has it in him to change. I think he is who he is, and he's not going to. I think, but I also think that they don't think they need to change, right? It's us that's the problem, us meaning anybody who dissents from them, because they've also, remember, they've got a lot of people telling them that they're doing a good job. You know, there's people that are critical of their behavior, but they've got a lot of supporters still. And so it depends, I suppose, on whether or not, first of all, they come to the realization that maybe their time is done for some of these ones who have been in for a very long time, like Tom Jackson say. For sure, he should maybe reconsider even running. All of them should reconsider running for the very reason that you said earlier, which is the Shadok spill, the Shadok leak, the Shadok Creek fiasco. They should all really reconsider whether or not their commitment is to the people of Hamilton or to keeping their job safe and making sure that I don't fully understand the implications of why they voted to keep it from us.
They took legal advice, right? And using that as the excuse for deciding to protect themselves over tell us that we needed to maybe protect ourselves and our animals and our kids from using that water, and and telling the RBG or telling the mayor of Burlington, who shares the water, what was going on. So I mean, they made a decision over and over and over again, and before the last election, to Joey's point earlier of why their pensions, there's an indirect benefit here. Not telling us about Sewergate maybe helped some of them get back in when they wouldn't have, and here they've got these fat pensions, right? So there were a couple of counselors who new counselors who heard the legal advice and went along for a bit until they realized, whoa, what is going on here, and stood up. And I think, Joey, that might have been, when we look back on the history of council, I mean, this week was a big week for progressive votes, but that might have been the moment where the real severing off of the old guard took place, where, because I don't even feel like those counselors who exposed Sewergate are even being treated well by much of the old guard much of the time. I think there was a break that happened because some people just would not go along with it anymore. And it feels to me as though that's when there's a real distinction between what the old guard represented, its values, its understanding of its relationship with the citizenry in the city, and the new counselors who are like, what our first job is to protect public health and to be transparent. I mean, what are we doing here? So, Joy, was that a moment to you, that Sewergate in-camera meeting and what came out after all of that? Was that when the old guard, do you think, started to lose their power or lose their loyalty?
Red Hill, I think, would have been the catalyst had Coots not come along. But Coots was a thing that everybody could relate to, whether you're a driver or not. You can relate to the idea that what is the job of municipal government? Clear the snow, pick up the garbage, and don't put shit into waterways.
For all the things that the old guard has done, for all of the scandals and all of the insults and all of the childish behavior and all the embarrassment and the things that have kept us behind because of their toxic culture, what made me so angry was the knowledge that they talked about it for hours. They knew what was going to come. And they still decided that our health and safety wasn't as important as covering their butts before the last election. And even, as we know, after the last election. So, Margaret, I don't feel like we're going on too long about Sewergate because, everyone is still angry. They have not been held to account yet for Sewergate at all. Any of them.
Absolutely true. And account. They haven't said, I'm sorry. They haven't accepted that they did anything wrong. They haven't, it's like, what, us, what did we do? You know, that's kind of what they're telling us. It's, and of course, for us, for the people, there's this incredulity that we have, right? That how could you not know that we would lose our minds to find out that you held this from us? And if you did know that we would lose our minds, and you, again, like you said, went ahead and did it anyway, are you so sure in your political career, in the safety of your seat, in the incumbency of your position, in your supporters whispering in your ear, that you've lost all sense of what's right and what's wrong? And of course, with the anti-sprawl movement and this what's right and what's wrong, again, sort of hitting them in the face, you know, are you going to listen to the people, or are you going to listen to your supporters, the people who fund your campaign, war chests, the people who take you out for lunch, the people who invite you to their special events, the people who give you awards? Or are you going to listen to the people who just vote you in? You know,
So this is a good segue to the urban boundary expansion vote. And I'd like to quickly focus on Tom Jackson, because November 9th, 2 weeks ago, so a week before the vote that we're discussing, he was still firmly speaking in favor of a boundary expansion. He was talking about choice. He was talking about jobs, construction. And then he voted against urban boundary expansion. And I still don't know why Tom did. Is it that Tom knows Donna Skelly's going to overrule the vote anyway, so therefore he could take the position that his voters wanted? Or is it that what I've been hearing from quite a few people, and in my own conversations with the seniors of Ward 6, and that's the thing to keep in mind with Tom, is that Tom doesn't care about the wider public opinion. What he cares about is his seniors. And if he goes to 801 Upper 801 Upper Gage, the seniors apartment building, and they say something, he listens. Everybody else he's willing to ignore, but when he's there with the seniors, he listens. And the seniors are angry about Coots Paradise. They are angry about climate change. They're angry about the state of the city's infrastructure deficit. They're looking at Tom Jackson and going, you've been here for 30 years and our city is in worse shape now than it was 30 years ago. Yes, there's been a few victories along the way. And yes, because of overflow from Toronto, Hamilton has a booming real estate sector right now. It's fascinating about the Stop Sprawl movement. When we talk about what do councillors value, well, they value developers' money because they've been able to always use that money to drown out any critical voices. They've been able to also, with city staff, diverting. You know, we see that with the budgets, that there are 3 years of very, very little public works. And then every 4 years at the election, public works goes on a bonanza of overtime and spending, that they can carry their clipboard. As Laura often notes, he carries his clipboard. And if you got a problem, there's a public works staffer there within a short period of time to fix it. But people are going, no, this is not enough. And what's fascinating about Stop Sprawl having 30,000 people on their mailing list. And turning back, because Tom Jackson and I have chatted about this before, Tom's well aware of what occurred in Guelph. In 2003, so this was the Walmart issue. In 2003, a pro-Walmart slate of candidates barely gets elected. The anti-Walmart forces reorganize themselves, create the Guelph Civic League, and in 2006, they substantially increased voter turnout. They kicked out the vast majority of the incumbents, and Guelph politics never went back to the old pro-developer councils, which is what Hamilton has been.
I love that you gave us that historic context for lasting change being possible, Joey. You just made my day, honestly, because as you mentioned, Stop the Sprawl mobilized citizens and won, and nothing succeeds like success. So I cannot imagine that there's not going to be more and more and more people getting involved with that movement and other movements like I Elect that are working really hard to keep track of what the old guard is doing. making sure that people are aware of, as you said, this pro-development history in the city and how they vote on things. I mean, if IELECT is just making people aware of what councillors are doing, it's enough, right? It's that having the eyes on what's going on. And Joey, you've done that so well for so many of us for so long as an independent journalist inside of City Hall, that it's great to see IELECT and Stop the Sprawl and other movements saying, look what they're doing. The votes are coming. We can speak up. We can really make things happen. And as for Tom Jackson, you know, he's always been great at staying elected, longest of any of them, because he pays attention to where the wind is blowing. He always has. And I might not be a senior in his ward, but my neighbor is, and my neighbor cannot wait not to vote for Tom ever again because of Sewergate, right? Like yelling through my fence at me in the morning, Laura, have you heard about Sewergate, right? I mean, Tom knows, he should know, and the rest of them should know that we're not going to forget about it. There has been zero accountability on that huge scandal. What's your take on the city manager's office in this broader discussion about where the city is heading politically?
The city manager's office is dysfunctional. It's not getting anything done. Frankly, I cannot actually name anything that they've done during COVID. So, you know, I agree. There was a lot of hope for Jeanette. She came in, it sounded like this was somebody who was going to be honest, transparent, hardworking. Open data, there's been basically no open data for a year and a half, despite the fact that there is a full-time chief digital officer whose job is to do this. Digital. Look at the failure of the city's COVID vaccine rollout. Look at the call center crashing. Look at the AstraZeneca clinic that was supposed to be for diverse communities that was miscommunicated. And when you look at who they've sidelined out of that city manager's office, it's been the staff who have the community trust and the community relationships to achieve positive results. That AstraZeneca clinic fiasco was because instead of putting the person who was trusted by those communities in charge, they put somebody that the counselors like in charge of that clinic, and it was a disaster. And it's really been disappointing. I have no confidence in the city manager. My own dealings with her office have been, frankly, extremely unprofessional. Some of the emails I received from the director of communications, it's not his role to be complaining to me about the fact that I'm calling out the city for its low video quality, that I'm calling out the counselors for not showing up to work, the quorum issue. And, you know, we had an argument this week about the fact that, well, probably the most infamous argument I've had with him is about, you know, when I say the city manager is responsible for the decisions of the bureaucracy. And, you know, he sent me this email, where do you get the idea that she is responsible for that? And I responded back with Section 229 of the Municipal Act, which states the city manager, as the chief administrative officer, is responsible for the operations of the city. But even if the Municipal Act didn't say that, here's the reality. The buck stops with the city manager. That's just how leadership works. And you get no sense that there's any leadership there. Very rarely does she speak at council. When you think about the Terry Whitehead browbeating staff, that was the individual staff member who filed the complaint originally. Then the Human Resources Department said, oh, well, maybe we should be the ones filing it. In any other municipality, and this has happened in a lot of other municipalities, the city manager comes into the meeting, tells the councillor to stop, and then files the complaint. The complainant is the city manager. And if Terry Whitehead takes this to judicial review, there is a good legal argument that the process was not properly followed, that the Human Resources Department cannot file a complaint. It has to be an individual, and it should have been the city manager. And why did the city manager not take the leadership and responsibility in that role? And even after the report came out, there was no statement from the city manager, no press release, not even a statement at council. This was an opportunity for her to say, we are reestablishing new relationships. The behavior that occurred was unacceptable. And as city manager, I will not tolerate bullying of any staff member.
Why didn't she stand up and protect that staffer when it was going on, when that infamous meeting on September 11th, 2020 was happening? Why didn't she get in there? We saw the previous city manager stand up for, did we not, for some staff when things were going on? She didn't. And then to, as you point out, not be the one to file the complaint And what blows my mind is no statement of the values that the city espouses. Nothing to say, hey, you know what? This integrity report exposed behaviors that are happening. And as the head of the city staff, I will not allow people to be harassed, for there to be lasting damage done to the culture of City Hall, for there to be bullying in the work environment. None of that. So, Margaret, why not? Why is Jeanette Smith not seemingly doing the role either from an operational point of view or from a spokesperson for that large, thousands of city staff, as many city managers do? Why does she seem to not be doing either of those things?
I have no answer, to be honest. I honestly do not know. That's just how bad the communications out of her office is that I have no idea. As somebody who follows City Hall more than anyone else, I can honestly not answer you any question about the city manager. That's how invisible they are. When I talk to staff, I get the same thing, is most staff they probably couldn't pick her out of a lineup.
And Margaret, I'm going to go to you on this, because when Joey just said invisible, wasn't it this city manager's hiring that was done off-site in a kind of a secret location, and people actually got on buses to go find out where the meeting was happening? I mean, am I mixing up my stupid, crazy Hamilton stories, or is this the right one?
No, that is the right one. And actually, I was going to I can't really speak very much to this issue because I don't know what's been going on with the city manager. Okay, I'll say that. However, when I think of the city manager, I think back to when she was hired, to that whole process, and how it was the first crack in the old guard with the new counselors challenging the process. So having come in under such a contentious process and into such a dysfunctional council, I don't know what to say, except that it would take a truly exceptionally strong person to be able to come in here and be able to, first of all, deal with the council in the way that they should be dealt with, vis-a-vis the fact that they are the employer of her. She is the only employee that they have. So that's where I go to that, whether or not that hiring process has put a cloud over her performance and not being able to fully execute what maybe she needs to do or wants to do, because there's been so much pushback to what she has been doing or hasn't done or whatever. I don't know the background or the inside out of that kind of stuff at City Hall. It does just speak to, when I think about Jeanette, I think about how difficult it must be for her to work in that environment before I go to think about anything else.
Margaret, I love your empathy and your emotional intelligence. Let me just say, don't take the job of running a major city with thousands of staff if you're not an incredibly strong person, right? I mean, don't do the job. I mean, she must have known with the whole cloak and dagger hiring process, walking into Hamilton was going to be a shit show. If you're going for a job at that level, you should know what's been going on. You just have to pick up the newspaper to find out what a shit show it would be to run the city of Hamilton at that time.
In fact, she had a huge opportunity. She arrives brand new. She could have been the hero of that story of, I came in and I literally found this pile of shit. We need to fix it. A literal pile of shit. But instead, you remember that when the cover-up was revealed, there was the response of City Hall and of her office and of council was, we need to find the whistleblower. We need to punish the whistleblower. That was the priority. And time and time again, we have seen these missed opportunities, these severe failures of communication. When COVID hit, she was on vacation, like so many other people. That is not her fault for being on vacation when it starts. But as soon as she was back, there should have been a press conference with the city manager saying, here's how we are responding. She didn't have to be there at every press conference, but once a month, there should have been a city manager's press conference. And then look at the public works resignation and suddenly no longer working there, where At 9:30 in the morning, she puts out a press release announcing that her general manager of public works has suddenly resigned. Out the door, which, whoa, huge bombshell. And then at 12:30, she puts out a second email of, and by the way, the director of water is no longer working for the city of Hamilton. We thank you. Two bombshells that are very traumatic for staff that Human Resources 101, a first year undergraduate student studying municipal administration, would know. You put those together in one email. And that also revealed, like, your general manager announces that they're suddenly resigning. They weren't leaving, they've resigned. That's quite a damning statement on a city manager, that your general manager has resigned, but then you make it even worse by showing an incompetence in having two emails instead of one.
Margaret, we've talked about the old guard of council, you know, one of them leaving in their victory lap publicly. We've talked about some of the moments where the power started to crack, and we're watching those cracks get larger. And we've talked about the city manager kind of being MIA in this situation. I'm not saying goes along with the old guard necessarily, but we haven't seen her stand up at moments when she could have on some scandals and really differentiated her leadership and given the staff the messaging that they probably wanted to hear. So do you see going forward, Margaret, that this momentum will continue? That the old guard, if you will not be able to vote as a bloc on things that they care about anymore, that there has been enough erosion around that kind of structure? And maybe it was Chad Collins leaving. I'm not sure what it was that really enabled the votes to change, but do you see that continuing up into the election, that they're going to have to come around on a lot of issues, or they will get, you know, beaten in their wards electorally, in spite of how many people love them at Tim Hortons on the weekends?
I don't think you can underestimate the success of the anti-sprawl campaign in telling people, showing people that yes, your actions do matter, your voices do matter, your letters do matter. If you've got a problem with the city, if you've got an issue with your counselor, let them know. If you feel mobilized in your community about something particular, let them know, because there is this sense that you can't fight City Hall, right? That, oh, City Hall is going to do whatever they're going to do, and everything's going to be, I'm just this little person and I can't do it. But then we have this campaign come along of these little people, right, who gathered together and created this one great big huge voice that said, no, we're not doing it. So now that's just going to be empowering the people. And if I were a counselor, I'd be looking at that and I'd be paying attention. I'd be saying, wait a second, you know, this isn't business as usual anymore. In my counselor voice, I would say I've disrespected social media. I haven't used it properly. I haven't communicated with my people. And now my people are turning around and they're telling me, and it's going to bite me if I don't listen. So whether they're willing to listen, whether they can listen, whether they think that they've had enough, which I think might be the case. I think a lot of them might just decide that they've had enough, that the constant pressure of the voices for better government, not necessarily against them, but for better government, is going to be more than they can handle, that it'll just be, they'll step aside.
That was beautifully summed up. I think it's the hope for all of us to get better government, and whether they leave by choice or get beaten at the polls, I really don't care. But I love how you described that building of that voice, a big, strong, powerful voice that people didn't think was maybe even possible to do. And in last week's OShow, Tom Wilson gave a shout out to Joey Coleman and the Jelly Brothers and Graham Crawford and others for keeping it up and up and up all this time and alerting people to what's going on in terms of governance, right? And it feels like that voice is getting bigger, and that opponents to poor governance, because it's not a particular issue, it's to poor governance, are starting to unite and to find their voice. And so, Joey, I just want to end on you on this point. You saw Brenda Johnson say something remarkable after the Me Too vote to follow the Integrity Commissioner's complaining recommendations against Terry Whitehead. And you saw her come out and say, we should also look at how developers are treating staff when they come in. And you made a commitment, Joey, to expose when people are treating staff in a bullying or harassing way. That to me feels like a major indicator that things are changing. Yes?
Oh, huge. As I said, I know and what's funny is we all know which developer Brenda Johnson was most likely referring to. It's no secret. And everybody at City Hall knows, including the reporters from The Spectator and CBC. So it's not just on me to call this out. And in fact, they should have been reporting it a long time ago. They have the legal resources. And yes, I understand that that means that these individuals are no longer sources and you're going to have to work around them. But yeah, I mean, it's over for this old guard culture. And, Brenda has been one of those ones that she came in 2010. She tried to do a bunch of things. And by 2012, she was just keeping her head low. And she's going to have to answer for her role in the culture during that time and ask herself if she could have done more. And she's actually a good person who will search her conscience. And I suspect that based upon how that came out, which was at the end of the urban boundary expansion debate after about 10 hours, that she was searching her conscience in that moment and came out and spoke out. And that changes everything. To be very clear, to that particular developer who everybody knows, but also some of the ones that are equally bad, but not as obnoxious. There's now a public interest defense that I can use in reporting the behavior. It's no longer Joey Coleman is reporting this and then Joey Coleman gets attacked for reporting the truth. It's Brenda talked about it. I reported it. You want to take me to court? Thankfully, we have anti-slap legislation in Ontario, and I can now cite Brenda Johnson's statement as the reason for my reporting, which means I can finally call it out. Because what we have seen at City Hall for decades is a disgrace to Hamilton, and I'm so fed up with, as a Hamiltonian of national stature, as a journalist, a Southern Fellow, going to events and people asking me why I'm still in Hamilton or talking about the embarrassment that is Hamilton City Hall. It's time to end it, and we're going to end it. Make sure to bring your friends out to vote on October 24th.
Well, Joey, I'm not going to ask you the name of the developer here on this program because I know that that's something for you to decide to do when and how you're going to do it. But I will say this, that you said, after what Brenda Johnson said, that Hamilton City Hall is a dangerous place to work. Was that not your exact word?
Yes, I've been assaulted twice at City Hall. I've watched counselors. I've watched developers. I've watched senior staff embarrass and humiliate middle level and junior staff. We've watched counselors take great joy in humiliating citizens who come and delegate. We've watched gaslighting. None of this is normal. And while Fred Eisenberger might think it's absolutely great, it's not. And this is why we have to vote and we have to elect new leadership, because it doesn't matter if, say, for example, Fred suddenly decides tomorrow that he's not going to tolerate it anymore. The fact of the matter is that the man did not understand it was wrong, or he didn't care. And each choice is equally bad.
It is not normal. We cannot accept that City Hall is a dangerous place for anyone to work. We cannot see our fellow citizens harassed, insulted, humiliated anymore. It has to change. I love that both of you think that it is going to change, that the momentum is there, that success breeds success. And as a voice grows, it becomes more powerful. And that is the voice, as Margaret so beautifully said on this OShow, of the little people. So thank you both for being on the show. You might be part of the little people, but you're also the voices that people trust on the issues they care about, which makes you huge in my mind. So thank you both for being here, Margaret and Joey. Stay safe. If you happen to have children who are under 12, you can get them vaccinated now, everybody. So please do that. And let's all get through this pandemic to a brighter future for our city.